What if I told you that thousands of years ago, a prophet in Babylon saw visions so precise, so detailed, that scholars still debate them today? Visions describing empires that hadn't even risen yet, and events some believe are still unfolding in our world right now? His name was Daniel, torn from his home as a boy, stripped of his identity, and forced to serve the very kings who destroyed his nation. But instead of being broken by Babylon, he became the one thing every empire fears most, a man who refused to bow to anyone but God. Kings would tremble before his visions, fire and lions couldn't touch him, and what he saw next would change the course of prophecy forever. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Jehoiakim of Judah, a great army came marching toward Jerusalem. It was led by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, the most powerful ruler on earth. The Bible tells this moment plainly in Daniel 1:1. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem, and besieged it. The city that once stood as the center of God's people now trembled before foreign soldiers. The siege did not last long. Jerusalem fell into the hands of Babylon, and with it the sacred treasures of the temple. Daniel 1:2 explains that the Lord allowed King Jehoiakim to be given into Nebuchadnezzar's hand, along with part of the vessels of the house of God. These vessels, made for worship, were carried away to Babylon and placed in the treasure house of a foreign god. It was a heavy blow, not just a military defeat, but a spiritual one. The people of Judah watched as symbols of their faith became trophies in a pagan land. But Nebuchadnezzar did not only want gold and silver, he wanted something more valuable, the best of Judah's young men. Daniel 1:3 says the king ordered Ashpenaz, master of his eunuchs, to bring in certain of the children of Israel from the king's seed and from the princes. These were not ordinary boys. According to Daniel 1:4, they had to be without blemish, well-favored, skillful in wisdom, and able to stand in the king's palace, so they could be taught the language and learning of the Chaldeans. Among these chosen young men were 4 whose names would echo through history: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Torn from their homeland, their families, and everything familiar, they were placed on a path that would test their faith like never before. Once inside the walls of Babylon, the young captives entered a world built to erase where they came from. The king appointed them a daily portion of his own food and of the wine he drank, so that after 3 years they might stand before him. This detail is found in Daniel 1:5. It may have seemed like an honor, eating from the king's table, but Babylon's food and customs came wrapped in idolatry, offered first to foreign gods before reaching human hands. Among these captives were the 4 young men from Judah, and Daniel 1:6 names them clearly: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. But before their training could begin, Babylon took something else from them: their names. Names in the ancient world were not just labels. They carried meaning, identity, and often a reference to the god someone served. Daniel 1:7 explains what happened next. The prince of the eunuchs gave them new names. Daniel became Belteshazzar, Hananiah became Shadrach, Mishael became Meshach, Azariah became Abednego. These new names were tied to Babylonian gods, an attempt to reshape who these young men believed they were. It was a quiet, calculated move. Strip the name, and perhaps the identity beneath it would follow. Yet even as Babylon tried to reshape their outward lives, something deeper remained untouched. What happened next would prove that some things cannot be erased by decree. Daniel had a decision to make, and it would define the rest of his life. Daniel 1:8 says, "But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. He did not shout, rebel, or run. He simply made a quiet decision inside his heart, and then acted on it. He asked the prince of the eunuchs for permission not to defile himself, and Daniel 1:9 tells us that God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with this man. Still, the prince was afraid. If Daniel and his friends looked weaker than the other young men, it could cost him his head before the king, as Daniel 1:10 describes. So Daniel turned to Melzar, the steward placed in charge of them, and proposed a test. Daniel 1:12 records his words exactly. "Prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days, and let them give us pulse to eat and water to drink. No royal food, no wine, just vegetables and water, for 10 days. Daniel 1:13 adds his challenge. Let their faces be compared afterward to the other young men who ate from the king's table, and let the decision be made from what was seen. The steward agreed. 10 days passed, and Daniel 1:15 reveals the result. Their countenances appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. From that day forward, Daniel 1:16 says the steward took away their portion of meat and wine and gave them pulse instead. Some stories don't just inform, they stay with you. If something stirred in your spirit just now, watching a young man hold on to his faith even in a foreign palace, you may be ready for Echoes Daily, where every morning you go deeper into one Bible story, the history behind it, the details most believers never learn, and what it means for your walk today. Daily readings, biblical companions who teach as they walk with you, and a community of pilgrims learning together. The link is in the first pinned comment, but the founding door is open only for a limited time. God honored the quiet decision Daniel and his friends made. Daniel 1:17 says, "As for these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams." Their faithfulness in a small matter, refusing the king's food, opened the door to something far greater. Wisdom itself became their inheritance. When the 3 years of training ended, Ashpenaz brought all the young men before Nebuchadnezzar himself. Daniel 1:18 describes this moment of final evaluation, the day the king would judge who was truly ready to serve in his court. And Daniel 1:19 tells us what the king found. Among them all was found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore stood they before the king. But the comparison did not stop there. Daniel 1:20 makes something remarkable clear. In every matter of wisdom and understanding that the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers in his entire kingdom. These 4 young exiles, still teenagers when they arrived in Babylon, now outshined the most trained scholars of the greatest empire on earth. Daniel 1:21 closes this chapter with a simple line. Daniel continued in the king's court until the 1st year of King Cyrus. This single verse quietly tells us that Daniel's story would stretch across decades, through the rise and fall of kings, all the way to the end of the Babylonian Empire itself. In the 2nd year of his reign, King Nebuchadnezzar's sleep was shattered by dreams that left him deeply troubled. Daniel 2:1 records this moment. His spirit was troubled and his sleep brake from him. Something in these dreams disturbed him so deeply that rest became impossible. The king called for his magicians, astrologers, sorcerers, and Chaldeans, demanding they tell him what he had dreamed. Daniel 2:2 shows how desperate he was. He summoned every wise man in his kingdom at once. When they stood before him, he made a shocking demand. Daniel 2:5 records his ultimatum. Not only must they interpret the dream, but they must first tell him what the dream was, without him revealing a single detail. If they failed, he warned, they would be cut in pieces, and their houses turned into a dunghill. The wise men protested. Daniel 2:10 captures their honest response. No king, however great, had ever asked such a thing of any magician or astrologer on earth. This kind of demand belonged only to the gods, and as Daniel 2:11 states, no man could reveal it except gods whose dwelling is not with flesh. Nebuchadnezzar's fury exploded. Daniel 2:12 says he commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be destroyed, every one of them without exception. This decree included Daniel and his 3 friends, even though they had not yet been called before the king. Daniel 2:13 explains that the decree went out, and they sought Daniel and his companions to be slain along with the rest. When Daniel learned of the king's decree, he did not panic. Daniel 2:14 shows him responding with wisdom and discretion, approaching Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, to ask why the decree was so urgent. After learning the situation, Daniel went in and asked the king for time, promising he would show the interpretation, as recorded in Daniel 2:16. Then Daniel returned to his house and told his 3 friends what had happened, urging them to desire mercy from the God of heaven concerning this secret, so they would not perish with the rest of Babylon's wise men. This moment of shared prayer is described in Daniel 2:17-18. That night the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision, and Daniel 2:19 tells us he blessed the God of heaven for it. Daniel praised God with a prayer of deep worship, declaring in Daniel 2:20-23 that wisdom and might belong to God, that he reveals deep and secret things, and that he had made known to him what they had desired of him. Then Daniel stood before Nebuchadnezzar and gave the king his answer. He explained the dream first, a great image with a head of fine gold, breast and arms of silver, belly and thighs of brass, legs of iron, and feet part of iron and part of clay, as described in Daniel 2:32-33. A stone, cut without hands, struck the image on its feet and broke them in pieces, and the stone became a great mountain that filled the whole earth, according to Daniel 2:34-35. Then came the interpretation. Daniel 2:38 identified Nebuchadnezzar himself as the head of gold. Daniel 2:39 spoke of another kingdom inferior to his that would rise after him, and then a third kingdom of brass that would rule over all the earth. Daniel 2:40 described a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, breaking and subduing everything before it. The stone that struck the image, Daniel explained in Daniel 2:44-45, represented a kingdom that the God of heaven would set up, one that would never be destroyed and would stand forever. Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face before Daniel and honored him, according to Daniel 2:46. Daniel 2:48 says the king promoted Daniel and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and chief of the governors over all the wise men. At Daniel's request, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were also set over the affairs of the province. As Daniel 2:49 records, while Daniel remained in the gate of the king, sometime later King Nebuchadnezzar built an image of gold, 90 feet high and 9 feet wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. This is described in Daniel 3:1. He then gathered every ruler, governor, and official of the province for its dedication, as Daniel 3:2-3 explains. A herald cried aloud that at the sound of every kind of instrument, all people must fall down and worship the golden image. Daniel 3:6 gave the punishment for refusal. Anyone who did not fall down and worship would immediately be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. Certain Chaldeans came forward and accused Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, reminding the king that these 3 men did not serve his gods, nor worship the golden image he had set up, according to Daniel 3:12. Nebuchadnezzar, filled with rage, commanded that they be brought before him. Daniel 3:15 gives them one final chance: worship or be cast that very hour into the burning furnace, with the king asking, "Who is that God that shall deliver them out of his hands?" Their answer became one of the most powerful declarations of faith in all of Scripture. Daniel 3:16-18 records their response. They told the king they were not careful to answer him in this matter, for their God whom they served was able to deliver them from the furnace, and he would deliver them from the king's hand. But even if he did not, they wanted the king to know they would still not serve his gods or worship the golden image. Nebuchadnezzar's fury filled his face, And he commanded the furnace be heated 7 times hotter than usual, according to Daniel 3:19. The mightiest soldiers in his army bound the 3 men and threw them into the flames, so hot that the very men who threw them in were killed by the fire, as Daniel 3:22 describes. Then the king looked into the furnace and saw something impossible. Daniel 3:25 records his astonishment. "Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God." Nebuchadnezzar called them out, and Daniel 3:27 says, "The princes, governors, and captains gathered and saw that the fire had no power upon their bodies, not a hair singed, their coats unchanged, without even the smell of smoke upon them." Some time later, Nebuchadnezzar had another dream, one that troubled him deeply again. He called for all the wise men of Babylon to interpret it, but none could until Daniel came before him, described as one in whom is the spirit of the holy gods, according to Daniel 4:8. The king told Daniel the dream: a great tree growing strong and tall, reaching to heaven, visible to the ends of the earth, giving shelter and food to every living creature, as recorded in Daniel 4:10-12. Then a holy watcher came down from heaven and cried aloud to cut down the tree, yet leave the stump of its roots in the earth, according to Daniel 4:14-15. The heart of the tree, the watcher declared, would be changed from a man's heart to that of a beast, and 7 times would pass over it, as stated in Daniel 4:16. Daniel was troubled by the meaning and hesitated to speak, until the king urged him not to be afraid. Daniel 4:19 shows Daniel's compassion, wishing the dream applied to the king's enemies rather than to Nebuchadnezzar himself. But the interpretation was clear. The great tree was the king. Daniel 4:25 delivered the warning directly. Nebuchadnezzar would be driven from men, dwelling with the beasts of the field, eating grass like oxen, wet with the dew of heaven, until 7 times passed over him, until he knew that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men. Daniel urged the king to break off his sins by righteousness and his iniquities by showing mercy to the poor, as advised in Daniel 4:27. 12 months passed, and the warning seemed forgotten. Nebuchadnezzar walked in his palace and looked over Babylon, declaring in Daniel 4:30 that this great city was built by his own power and for the honor of his majesty. While the words were still in his mouth, a voice fell from heaven, announcing that the kingdom had departed from him, according to Daniel 4:31. That very hour, Daniel 4:33 describes what happened. He was driven from men, ate grass like oxen, his body wet with the dew of heaven, his hair grown like eagle's feathers, and his nails like birds' claws. At the end of the appointed time, Nebuchadnezzar lifted his eyes to heaven, and his understanding returned to him. Daniel 4:34 records his response. He blessed the Most High and praised him who lives forever, whose dominion is an everlasting dominion. His kingdom, his honor, and his reason were restored to him, as Daniel 4:36 confirms, and his counselors and lords sought him out, establishing him again in his kingdom, with even greater majesty added to him. Daniel 4:37 closes the chapter with Nebuchadnezzar's own words, praising and extolling the King of heaven, for all his works are truth, and those who walk in pride he is able to bring low. Years had passed since Nebuchadnezzar ruled Babylon, and now a new king sat on the throne, Belshazzar. One night he made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords, drinking wine before them all. This moment opens Daniel 5:1. As the wine took hold of him, Belshazzar gave a command that would seal his fate. Daniel 5:2 describes what he ordered: to bring the gold and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple in Jerusalem, so that the king, his lords, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. These were sacred vessels, set apart for the worship of the one true God, and now they were being used for a drunken celebration. Daniel 5:3-4 shows exactly what happened next. The vessels were brought in, and as they drank wine from them, they praised the gods of gold, silver, brass, iron, wood, and stone, lifeless idols receiving honor through cups meant for the living God. It was an act of open disrespect, using what was holy for what was profane. In that same hour, something impossible appeared. Daniel 5:5 describes it plainly. Fingers of a man's hand came out and wrote on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace, right by the candlestick, in plain sight of the king himself. Belshazzar watched the hand as it wrote, and his reaction was immediate and physical. Daniel 5:6 says his countenance changed, his thoughts troubled him, the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees knocked against each other. The powerful king, moments earlier boasting over stolen temple treasures, now stood shaking with fear. He cried out for the astrologers, Chaldeans and soothsayers to be brought in, promising great rewards to whoever could read the writing and explain its meaning, according to Daniel 5:7. But none of them could read it, and none could make known its interpretation to the king, as stated in Daniel 5:8. This failure only deepened Belshazzar's terror, and Daniel 5:9 says he was greatly troubled, his countenance changed within him, and his lords were astonished. The queen, hearing of the commotion, entered the banquet hall. She reminded the king of a man in his kingdom with the spirit of the holy gods in him, someone who had served during the days of Nebuchadnezzar, found to have light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods. This account is given in Daniel 5:10-11. She spoke of Daniel, renamed Belteshazzar by the former king, a man known for interpreting dreams, showing hard sentences, and dissolving doubts, as described in Daniel 5:12. Daniel was brought before the king. Belshazzar asked him directly if he was the Daniel of the children of the captivity of Judah, and offered him rewards of scarlet clothing, a gold chain, and rule, as the third in the kingdom, if he could read the writing and show its interpretation, according to Daniel 5:13-16. Daniel answered the king plainly, telling him to keep his gifts and give his rewards to another, though he would still read the writing and make known its interpretation, as recorded in Daniel 5:17. He then reminded Belshazzar of Nebuchadnezzar's past, how God had given him a kingdom, majesty, glory, and honor, and how pride had once brought him low until he learned that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, according to Daniel 5:18-21. Daniel then turned his words directly to Belshazzar, telling him he had not humbled his heart, though he knew all this had happened to his father before him. Daniel 5:23 describes the charge against him, lifting himself up against the Lord of heaven, bringing the vessels of his house before him to drink wine from them, praising gods of silver and gold, brass, iron, wood, and stone, while not glorifying the God who held his breath and all his ways in his hand. Then came the meaning of the writing. Daniel 5:25 gives the words themselves, mene, mene, tekel, upharsin. Daniel explained each word in turn. Daniel 5:26 revealed that many meant God had numbered the kingdom and finished it. Daniel 5:27 explained that tekel meant the king had been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Daniel 5:28 revealed that peres meant the kingdom was divided and given to the Medes and Persians. That very night the prophecy came to pass. Daniel 5:30 states it directly. In that night was Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, slain. Daniel 5:31 adds that Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. Under the new rule of Darius, the kingdom was reorganized. Daniel 6:1 explains that it pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes who would be over the whole kingdom. Above these princes, Daniel 6:2 says the king appointed 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was one, so that the princes would give account to them and the king would suffer no loss. Daniel quickly distinguished himself above the others. Daniel 6:3 describes how he was preferred above the presidents and princes because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm. This favor did not go unnoticed by the other officials, and it stirred something dangerous among them. The presidents and princes sought to find fault against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but Daniel 6:4 says they could find no occasion or fault because he was faithful, and no error or fault was found in him. Left without any wrongdoing to accuse him of, these men turned to a different plan. Daniel 6:5 records their conclusion. They would find no occasion against Daniel except concerning the law of his God. They went together to King Darius and proposed a new decree. Daniel 6:7 describes their suggestion that whoever asked a petition of any god or man for 30 days, except of the king, should be cast into a den of lions. They urged Darius to sign the decree so it could not be changed, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which could not be altered, as stated in Daniel 6:8. Darius signed the writing, as Daniel 6:9 confirms, unaware of the trap being set for his most trusted official. When Daniel learned that the decree was signed, he did not change his habits. Daniel 6:10 shows his response. He went into his house, and with his windows open toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day, praying and giving thanks before his God, just as he had done before this decree existed. The men who plotted against him found him exactly where they expected, praying and making supplication before his God, according to Daniel 6:11. The conspirators returned to King Darius and reminded him of the decree he had signed. Daniel 6:12 shows them confirming the law could not be changed, according to the law of the Medes and Persians. Then they revealed what they had witnessed. Daniel 6:13 describes their accusation, that Daniel, one of the captivity of Judah, did not regard the king or the decree, but made his petition 3 times a day. Daniel 6:14 shows the king's reaction. He was greatly displeased with himself and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him, laboring until the sun went down to find a way to save him. But the men reminded Darius that the law of the Medes and Persians could not be altered, according to Daniel 6:15. With no other option, the king commanded that Daniel be brought and cast into the den of lions. Daniel 6:16 records the king's own words to Daniel in that moment, expressing hope that his God, whom he served continually, would deliver him. A stone was brought and laid upon the mouth of the den, sealed with the king's own signet and the signet of his lords, so that nothing could be changed concerning Daniel, as described in Daniel 6:17. Darius went to his palace and passed the night fasting without any music brought before him, and sleep departed from him, according to Daniel 6:18. Very early in the morning, the king rose and went in haste to the den of lions. Daniel 6:20 captures his cry as he approached, calling out with a lamenting voice, asking if the living God, whom Daniel served continually, had been able to deliver him from the lions. Daniel answered from within the den. Daniel 6:21-22 records his words, that his God had sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, so they had not hurt him, because he was found innocent before God, and also before the king, having done no wrong. Daniel 6:23 says the king was exceedingly glad, and commanded Daniel to be taken up out of the den, and no manner of hurt was found upon him, because he believed in his God. The king then commanded that the men who had accused Daniel be cast into the den of lions, along with their children and their wives. And Daniel 6:24 says the lions overpowered them before they reached the bottom of the den. Afterward, Daniel 6:25-26 records that King Darius wrote to all people, nations, and languages, declaring that men should tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, enduring forever. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions in his head while lying on his bed. Daniel 7:1 introduces this vision, which he wrote down and told the sum of the matters. Daniel 7:2 describes the beginning of what he saw, the 4 winds of heaven striving upon the great sea. 4 great beasts came up from the sea, each different from the other, according to Daniel 7:3. The first was like a lion with eagle's wings, and Daniel 7:4 describes how its wings were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, made to stand on 2 feet like a man, given a man's heart. The second beast was like a bear, raised up on one side, with 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth, told to arise and devour much flesh, as described in Daniel 7:5. Daniel 7:6 describes the third beast, like a leopard, with 4 wings of a fowl on its back, and 4 heads, given dominion. Then came the fourth beast, and Daniel 7:7 describes it as dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong, with great iron teeth, devouring and breaking in pieces, stamping the remains with its feet, different from all the beasts before it, having 10 horns. As Daniel considered the horns, another horn, a little one, came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were plucked up by its roots. This little horn had eyes like a man and a mouth speaking great things, as described in Daniel 7:8. While Daniel watched, the scene shifted to something majestic. Daniel 7:9 describes thrones being set, and the Ancient of Days taking his seat, his garment white as snow, the hair of his head like pure wool, his throne like a fiery flame, its wheels burning fire. Daniel 7:10 continues the vision. A fiery stream issued from before him. Thousands upon thousands ministered to him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him, and the judgment was set, and the books were opened. Daniel watched because of the voice of the great words the horn spoke, and he beheld until the beast was slain, its body destroyed and given to the burning flame, according to Daniel 7:11. Daniel 7:12 adds that the rest of the beasts had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. Then Daniel saw in the night visions one like the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven, approaching the Ancient of Days, brought near before him. Daniel 7:13 describes this figure's arrival before the throne. Daniel 7:14 reveals what was given to him: dominion, glory, and a kingdom, so that all people, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion, an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom, one that shall not be destroyed. Daniel, troubled in his spirit, approached one who stood by to ask the truth of all this, according to Daniel 7:15-16. This one explained that the 4 great beasts were 4 kings which would arise out of the earth, as recorded in Daniel 7:17. But the saints of the Most High, Daniel 7:18 revealed, would take the kingdom and possess it forever, even forever and ever. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to Daniel, following the one he had seen before. Daniel 8:1 opens this new chapter of Revelation. In the vision, Daniel found himself at Shushan in the palace in the province of Elam, standing by the river Ulai, according to Daniel 8:2. He lifted his eyes and saw a ram standing before the river, with 2 horns, both high, but one higher than the other, the higher one coming up last, as described in Daniel 8:3. Daniel 8:4 shows this ram pushing westward, northward, and southward, so that no beast could stand before it, and none could deliver out of its hand, doing according to its will, and becoming great. As Daniel considered this, a male goat came from the west, moving across the face of the whole earth without touching the ground, having a notable horn between its eyes, according to Daniel 8:5. The goat came to the ram with 2 horns and ran at it with furious power, according to Daniel 8:6. Daniel 8:7 describes the clash. The goat struck the ram, broke its 2 horns, cast it to the ground, and stamped upon it, with no power able to deliver the ram from the goat's hand. The goat grew very great, but when it was strong, the great horn was broken, and in its place came up 4 notable horns toward the 4 winds of heaven, as recorded in Daniel 8:8. Out of one of them came a little horn, which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the pleasant land, according to Daniel 8:9. This horn grew up to the host of heaven, casting some of the host and stars to the ground, trampling them according to Daniel 8:10, magnifying itself even to the prince of the host, taking away the daily sacrifice, casting down the place of the sanctuary, as described in Daniel 8:11. Daniel heard one saint speaking, and another saint asked how long this vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation would last, according to Daniel 8:13. The answer given in Daniel 8:14 spoke of 2,300 days, after which the sanctuary would be cleansed. Gabriel came near and explained the vision to Daniel. Daniel 8:20 revealed that the ram with two horns represented the kings of Media and Persia. Daniel 8:21 identified the rough goat as the king of Greece and the great horn between its eyes as the first king. Gabriel explained further in Daniel 8:22 that the horn being broken and four standing up in its place meant 4 kingdoms would arise from that nation, though not with its power. Daniel 8:27 closes this vision with Daniel fainting and being sick for days, astonished by what he had seen, though understanding it. In the first year of Darius, son of Ahasuerus, of the seed of the Medes, who was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans, Daniel 9:1 marks this new moment in the story. Daniel 9:2 explains what stirred Daniel's heart during this time. He understood by books the number of years which the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah the prophet, that Jerusalem would be desolate for 70 years. This understanding moved Daniel to action. Daniel 9:3 describes him setting his face toward the Lord God, seeking him by prayer and supplications, with fasting, sackcloth, and ashes. He prayed to the Lord his God, making his confession according to Daniel 9:4, acknowledging the great and dreadful God who keeps covenant and mercy with those who love him and keep his commandments. Daniel confessed the sins of his people plainly. Daniel 9:5 records his words. They had sinned, committed iniquity, done wickedly, and rebelled, departing from God's precepts and judgments. He acknowledged that righteousness belonged to the Lord, but confusion of face belonged to them, the men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, because of the trespass committed against God, as stated in Daniel 9:7-8. Daniel continued, acknowledging that mercies and forgiveness belonged to the Lord their God, though they had rebelled against him, according to Daniel 9:9. He confessed they had not obeyed the voice of the Lord their God, to walk in his laws which he set before them by his servants the prophets, as recorded in Daniel 9:10. Because of this, Daniel 9:11 explains, the curse and the oath written in the law of Moses had been poured out upon them because they had sinned against him. Daniel asked the Lord to hear the prayer of his servant and to cause his face to shine upon his desolate sanctuary for the Lord's own sake, according to Daniel 9:17. He asked God to incline his ear and open his eyes to behold the desolations of the city called by his name, according to Daniel 9:18. Daniel 9:19 records his closing plea, O Lord, hear, O Lord, forgive. O Lord, hearken and do. Defer not for God's own sake, for the city and the people were called by his name. While Daniel was still speaking and praying, confessing his sin and the sin of his people, presenting his supplication before the Lord for the holy mountain, Daniel 9:20 describes this continued posture of prayer. And while he was still speaking in prayer, the man Gabriel, whom he had seen before in the vision, came to him about the time of the evening oblation, according to Daniel 9:21. Gabriel informed him and talked with him, telling Daniel he had come forth to give him skill and understanding, according to Daniel 9:22. Daniel 9:23 explains that at the beginning of Daniel's supplications, the commandment came forth, and Gabriel had come to show him, because Daniel was greatly beloved, urging him to understand the matter and consider the vision. Then Gabriel delivered the great prophecy. Daniel 9:24 records the scope of it. 70 weeks are determined upon the people and the holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Daniel 9:25 gives the timeline in detail, from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince, would be 7 weeks and 62 weeks, and the street would be built again, and the wall, even in troublous times. Daniel 9:26 continues, explaining that after 62 weeks, Messiah would be cut off, but not for himself, and the people of the prince that shall come would destroy the city and the sanctuary, its end coming with a flood, with war determined unto the end, and desolations decreed. Daniel 9:27 closes the prophecy. He shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. In the 3rd year of Cyrus king of Persia, a thing was revealed unto Daniel, whose name was called Belteshazzar, and the thing was true, but the time appointed was long, and he understood the thing and had understanding of the vision. This introduction is given in Daniel 10:1. Daniel 10:2 describes his condition at that time. He was mourning 3 full weeks. He ate no pleasant bread, no flesh nor wine came into his mouth, and he did not anoint himself until 3 whole weeks were fulfilled, according to Daniel 10:3. On the 24th day of the 1st month, Daniel was by the side of the great river Hiddekel, according to Daniel 10:4. He lifted his eyes and looked, and saw a certain man clothed in linen, his loins girded with fine gold, as described in Daniel 10:5. Daniel 10:6 continues the description. His body was like beryl, his face like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like lamps of fire, his arms and feet like polished brass, and the voice of his words like the voice of a multitude. Daniel alone saw the vision, for the men with him did not see it, but a great quaking fell upon them, causing them to flee and hide themselves, according to Daniel 10:7. Daniel 10:8 says he was left alone and saw this great vision. And there remained no strength in him. His comeliness turned into corruption, retaining no strength. Then Daniel heard the voice of his words, and when he heard it, he fell into a deep sleep on his face, with his face toward the ground, according to Daniel 10:9. A hand touched him and set him upon his knees and the palms of his hands, as described in Daniel 10:10. The being told Daniel he was greatly beloved, and to understand the words spoken to him and stand upright, for he had now been sent to him, according to Daniel 10:11. The messenger explained his delay to Daniel. Daniel 10:12 records his words. From the first day Daniel set his heart to understand and to chasten himself before God. His words were heard, and the messenger had come because of his words. Daniel 10:13 revealed something remarkable. The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood him 21 days, but Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help him, so he remained there with the kings of Persia. The messenger had come to make Daniel understand what would happen to his people in the latter days, according to Daniel 10:14. Daniel, overwhelmed, set his face toward the ground and became dumb, according to Daniel 10:15. One with the likeness of the sons of men touched his lips, and Daniel opened his mouth and spoke to the one standing before him, saying that sorrows had turned upon him, and he retained no strength, as described in Daniel 10:16. The being strengthened him, touching him and telling him to fear not, wishing him peace, urging him to be strong, according to Daniel 10:19. After Daniel was strengthened, he spoke again. The messenger then revealed why he had come, telling Daniel he would return to fight with the prince of Persia, and when he had gone forth, the prince of Grecia would come, according to Daniel 10:20. He added that none held with him in these things except Michael, Daniel's prince, as recorded in Daniel 10:21. The vision continued into a long and detailed prophecy concerning kings who would rise and fall. Daniel 11:2 begins with a mention of 3 kings still to stand up in Persia, and a 4th far richer than them all, who would stir up all against the realm of Grecia. Daniel 11:3 speaks of a mighty king who would stand up ruling with great dominion, doing according to his will. This king's kingdom would be broken and divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, not to his posterity, according to Daniel 11:4. The prophecy then unfolds a long history between the king of the south and the king of the north, 2 powers whose conflicts would shape the region for generations. Daniel 11:5 speaks of the king of the south becoming strong, though one of his princes would become stronger still. The chapter describes marriages made for political alliance, according to Daniel 11:6, wars, invasions, and shifting fortunes between these 2 kingdoms across many verses. Daniel 11:13 describes the king of the north returning after certain years with a great army and much riches. This back-and-forth struggle for power continues through much of the chapter, detailing armies, sieges, and the rise and fall of rulers between these 2 thrones. Out of this long conflict rises a particular figure, described with striking detail. Daniel 11:21 introduces him as a vile person, one to whom they had not given the honor of the kingdom, but who came in peaceably and obtained the kingdom by flattery. This ruler's actions grew increasingly bold as the chapter continues. Daniel 11:31 describes armies that would stand on his part, polluting the sanctuary of strength, taking away the daily sacrifice, and placing the abomination that maketh desolate. This act of desecration echoes the earlier vision Daniel had seen concerning the sanctuary and the transgression of desolation. Daniel 11:36 describes this king doing according to his will, exalting and magnifying himself above every god, speaking marvelous things against the God of gods, prospering until the indignation is accomplished. The chapter continues describing his campaigns, his disregard for the God of his fathers, and his eventual downfall. Daniel 11:45 closes this section, describing him planting the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain, yet coming to his end with none to help him. At that time, Daniel 12:1 declares, "Michael shall stand up, the great prince who stands for the children of Daniel's people, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never was, since there was a nation even to that same time. But at that time Daniel's people shall be delivered, everyone found written in the book." Daniel 12:2 gives one of the clearest promises in the entire book. "Many that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt." Daniel 12:3 adds that those who are wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and those who turn many to righteousness shall shine as the stars forever and ever. Daniel was then given instructions. Daniel 12:4 tells him to shut up the words and seal the book even to the time of the end, when many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. Daniel looked and saw 2 others standing, one on the bank of the river on one side, and the other on the bank of the river on the other side, according to Daniel 12:5. One asked the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, how long it would be to the end of these wonders, according to Daniel 12:6. Daniel 12.7 records the answer. The man clothed in linen held up his right hand and his left hand to heaven, and swore that it would be for a time, times and a half, and when the scattering of the power of the holy people is accomplished, all these things shall be finished. Daniel heard but did not understand, and he asked what would be the end of these things, according to Daniel 12:8. He was told to go his way, for the words were closed up and sealed till the time of the end, according to Daniel 12:9. Daniel 12:10 explains that many shall be purified, made white, and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. The vision closes with specific numbers. Daniel 12:11 mentions that from the time the daily sacrifice is taken away, and the abomination that makes desolate is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Daniel 12:12 pronounces a blessing on the one who waits and comes to the 1,335 days. Daniel 12:13 gives the final words spoken to Daniel to go his way till the end, for he shall rest and stand in his lot at the end of the days. If this story stirred something in you, don't let it end here. Hit subscribe so you never miss the next journey through Scripture, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone facing their own furnace, their own lion's den, their own decision to stay faithful when it would be easier to bend. And if you're ready to go deeper than a single video, remember what we shared earlier. Echoes Daily is waiting for you. Every morning, a new story. The history, the details, the meaning behind the words you just heard tonight. The link is in the first pinned comment, but the founding door won't stay open forever. Thank you for walking through the book of Daniel with us. We'll see you in the next story.